Mom found out about my secret wardrobe. Alex had always been careful, meticulous even. In a small town where every secret had a shelf life, keeping his felt like balancing on a tightrope. Beneath his bed, hidden away in a tattered cardboard box, was a collection of things he barely allowed himself to think about, let alone acknowledge fully. A floral dress, a pair of heels, a few tubes of makeup, and a dream so fragile he barely dared to hold it. These items weren't just clothes. They were pieces of something he couldn't yet name, fragments of a self he wasn't sure how to piece together. It had started innocently enough. A dab of lipstick stolen from his mom's vanity, an oversized skirt bought under the pretense of a school costume. But over time, the pull became undeniable. Wearing those clothes was like stepping into sunlight after years of living in shadows. In the mirror, he saw not the awkward, unsure boy the world knew, but someone who felt whole. Yet every moment of joy was tethered to fear. What would his mom think? What would the town say? His mom, Susan, was a kind woman, but her kindness often ran parallel to tradition. She had raised Alex on her own, working tirelessly to make sure he wanted for nothing, but her world was built on the bedrock of small-town norms. And so, Alex kept his secret buried, believing it was the only way to keep the fragile peace between them intact. Or so he thought. That Tuesday afternoon started like any other. School had been another exhausting performance of blending in, of pretending not to care about the jeers or the invisible walls between him and everyone else. When Alex got home, he immediately sensed something was off. The house smelled of fresh laundry, a sure sign his mom had been on one of her cleaning sprees. His heart sank as he climbed the stairs, his mind racing. The door to his room was ajar. And there, laid out on his bed like an exhibit, was everything he had worked so hard to keep hidden. Dresses, skirts, makeup, his secret, exposed under the unforgiving light of day. Susan stood by the window, holding one of the dresses. Her back was to him, but Alex could see the tension in her shoulders. His chest tightened, and he felt like the floor was giving way beneath him. "Mom, His voice cracked, the words sticking in his throat. She turned slowly, the dress still in her hands. Her expression wasn't what he expected. There was no anger, no disappointment, just a quiet curiosity that made his heart ache. "I wasn't snooping," she said gently. "I was cleaning and I found these." She hesitated, glancing between the dress and him. "Alex, do you want to tell me about this?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Every excuse, every denial he'd rehearsed vanished. All that remained was the truth, terrifying and raw. He braced himself for judgment, for the fracture in their relationship he'd feared for so long. But instead, she did something unexpected. She held the dress out to him, her voice soft. "Why don't you try it on?" Alex blinked, sure he'd misheard her.
"What?"
"I want to understand," she said simply. "If this is important to you, I want to see. Please." The vulnerability in her tone pierced through his defenses. Hands trembling, he took the dress from her and retreated to the bathroom, his mind a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. The mirror greeted him with a reflection he barely recognized. But as he slipped into the dress, that familiar sense of calm enveloped him, quieting the storm inside. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Susan was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, her eyes widened, not in shock, but in wonder. "You're beautiful," she said softly, the words wrapping around him like a warm embrace. For a moment, Alex couldn't speak. He felt a knot in his chest loosen, something fragile and guarded beginning to bloom. All his fears, all the nights spent wondering if anyone could ever understand, seemed to dissipate under the warmth of her gaze. "It's not just the dress, Alex," she added, her voice steady. "It's you. I see you." And for the first time, Alex felt seen, not as a boy pretending, not as someone hiding, but as himself. The question hung in the air between them, soft yet piercing. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, brushing a strand of hair away from his face with a tenderness that made Alex's throat tighten. His eyes dropped to his lap, hands fidgeting with the hem of the dress he still wore. "I didn't know how," he admitted, his voice a fragile whisper. "I wasn't even sure I understood it myself." His mom exhaled slowly and gestured for him to sit beside her on the bed. When he hesitated, she smiled, patting the spot next to her. "You don't need to have it all figured out, Alex. But you don't have to do it alone either. We can take it one step at a time." Tentatively, he sank down beside her, a mix of relief and trepidation swirling in his chest. He wasn't sure what he expected. Awkward silences, a clumsy attempt at reassurance, but what followed surprised him. She asked questions, gentle ones, not probing or judgmental, just curious. Her words were careful, her tone warm, as if she were navigating uncharted territory alongside him. The afternoon stretched into evening as they talked. At first, it was halting and tentative, but slowly, the words came easier. She wanted to know when it started, how he felt, and what he was afraid of. Her openness encouraged his, and soon, they were sifting through the pile of clothes together. She even held up a blouse, turning it this way and that, before nodding approvingly. "This is lovely. Did you pick it yourself?" she asked. Alex flushed but nodded. "Yeah. I thought it looked soft." Her smile widened. "Good eye. You've got taste." As they went through the collection, she shared small anecdotes of her own. How she had felt unsure about herself at his age, how she'd experimented with her own style, how she understood in her own way what it meant to feel out of place. When they reached the makeup, she chuckled, holding up a tube of mascara. "Well, I'm no expert, but we can figure this out together," she said with a wink. For the first time in years, Alex felt the weight of secrecy lift from his shoulders. He hadn't realized how much it had cost him to carry it alone. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened in ways he hadn't thought possible. His mom became his confidant, his cheerleader, and his guide. Together, they navigated his exploration of identity, starting small, trying on outfits at home, experimenting with makeup, and learning to embrace this new side of himself. Eventually, the walls of their house could no longer contain his growing confidence. They ventured out together, first for quiet walks in nearby parks, and then to the local mall. Each outing was a blend of nerves and exhilaration, the world feeling both too big and wonderfully expansive. "You're braver than I ever was," his mom said one day as they strolled through a boutique, her arm linked with his. "I hope you know that." The words stuck with Alex, a quiet affirmation that fueled his courage. He began to wear pieces of his new wardrobe more openly, even at school. Subtle at first, a softer shirt, fitted jeans, but enough for him to feel like he was stepping closer to his true self. Of course, there were challenges. Stares, whispered remarks, and the occasional unkind word reminded him that acceptance wasn't universal. But those moments, though painful, couldn't overshadow the joy of living authentically. Months passed, and Alex's transformation became more apparent, not just in how he dressed, but in how he carried himself. He walked taller, spoke with more certainty, and began to meet his reflection with a sense of pride. One evening, as he stood before the mirror in a dress that flowed elegantly down his frame, his mom appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, her eyes misty, but her smile radiant. "You look radiant," she said softly. Alex turned to face her, the corners of his mouth curving into a smile. "Thanks, Mom, for everything." She stepped closer and placed a hand on his cheek. "You don't have to thank me. It's my job to love you no matter what. And I couldn't be prouder of the person you're becoming." Her words filled the room with a quiet warmth, one that Alex carried with him long after she left. As he returned his gaze to the mirror, he saw more than just the clothes or the makeup. He saw someone who had fought through fear and doubt, who had found strength in vulnerability, and who was finally beginning to understand the beauty of being himself. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but Alex no longer walked it alone. And as he embraced his reflection, he realized that the freedom he felt was not just in how he looked, it was in who he was.